This is WCN, the Whole Care Network. You talk, we listen. Content presented on the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed during this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent views of the Whole Care Network. Always consult your physician for medical and fitness advice, and always consult your attorney for legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Have you ever met anybody that has caregiving on their bucket list of things to do in life?
Beyond caregiving, how do we care?
We also have to care for ourselves.
How do we treat friends, family, strangers we meet?
Forget it.
How do we heal? The physical, social, financial, spiritual.
Hello.
By creating healing ties. Tying it all together like a bow tie. With your host, Christopher McClellan, the bow tie guy.
Well, greetings, everyone. It is Christopher McClellan, the bow tie guy, for another episode of Healing Ties 2.0 featured on the Whole Care Network. And as you know, on the Whole Care Network, we are all about sharing stories and resources because we believe it's through story sharing where diversity meets the road to collaborate on a common cause. And our common cause is supporting caregivers before, during, and after caregiving ends. And as you know, we're celebrating National Family Caregivers Month with the reboot of the popular Healing Ties podcast. Well, I think it's popular, and I think my guest does too, with our 30 podcast and 30 days to celebrate National Family Caregivers Month. And more importantly, the soft launch of our new Whole Care Network website. So when you get a chance, please visit our new website at thewholecarenetwork.com. Well, you got to go to the old site to get to the new site, but the link is right there. But when you get to the new site, you'll meet a fellow by the name of Bo, because Bo ties things together on the Whole Care Network. As soon as you see Bo, you'll get it 100%. And during our soft launch, we're asking our listeners to provide us with feedback on the new site so we can continue to build the site so you can easily find your favorite podcasts, favorite blogs, and videos. Oh, and by the way, you'll be able to search content on the Whole Care Network via our 4 pillars of care: physical, social, financial, and spiritual health. All content will be categorized in one or all 4 of those pillars. Finally, be on the lookout for our new YouTube channel featuring live shows, our streaming 24/7 radio station, and a few other changes coming to the Whole Care Network in 2021. Well, enough from me. I'm just tickled to have my good friend, Gary Joseph LeBlanc from Dementia Spotlight Foundation join me today. If you don't know Gary by now, you're going to know Gary by the time this podcast is over. Gary is one of my closest friends, somebody that I admire, and author. And we're going to talk about the Dementia Spotlight and all the work Gary has done throughout the years supporting family caregivers. Gary, thanks for joining me.
Chris, it's such a pleasure being with you.
I was looking back at the shows. And we first did our first show together in 2012. Can you imagine that?
I didn't think it was that far back, but that's pretty cool.
Well, I think we both had hair on our heads then, so
a little bit.
And since then time, we've stayed in touch, and you've had a lot of changes, as I have. But tell our listeners a little bit about you, because I could tell it, but it'd be a bit easier coming from you. And then we're going to talk about respite care today. I think that's the topic for our podcast.
I am currently now the Director of Education for the Dementia Spotlight Foundation. I took on this position a couple of years ago. But as far as caregiving itself goes on, it's all family history, family education on it. I took care of my dad for 12 years. He died of Alzheimer's right after Dad. 8 years with Mom. She died of vascular dementia. And I'm now caring for a third family member with early onset on it. So we were pretty lost on the first run, but we get it down pretty good right now. We're getting pretty experienced over here. So, yeah, we're doing great. Doing a lot about education. Of course, this year with the COVID, everything's upside down. I'm normally throughout the state of Florida doing the sheriff's department, teaching them on dementia awareness, doing different classes for all different counties. Health department, I should be out there teaching on the special needs shelters on dementia. All this has been canceled. I'm happy to say that I just did get the schedule for 2001 for the sheriff's departments.
Very
so
good.
There's a little sign that things are maybe going back to normal a little bit on it, but we'll see when we get there. Let's just put it that way.
You know, I don't mean to embarrass you here, Gary, but one of the things I've admired about you is that through your caregiving experience with your dad and then subsequently with your mom, you've taken your experience and you've helped people all over the world understand dementia and Alzheimer's and understand and how to work through the issues, and just so admirable for what you've been able to do by sharing your story and helping others.
Well, I don't want people to make the same mistakes I made, because 22 years ago, 23, when I started this journey and this campaign in caregiving, there was no information out there.
Right.
Not like there is today. I mean, we still got a long ways to go to educate on it. But I mean, Facebook didn't even exist.
Right.
Think about that. So you're trying to get stuff online.
Think about that.
Yeah. It was a different world back then.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you, we're struggling to find information on it. So, I mean, I went the hard way. I mean, bottom line on it. But both my parents were educators. I mean, my dad was a principal. My mother was the teacher. That's how they met in the school on it. I mean, so education was always been in my background a little bit on it. I get it from them, I guess, on it. And I enjoy being out there educating folks on this stuff on it. And it's so much neat.
Well, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, because your presentations are engaging, informative, and you take a difficult subject and you make it fun. It's all because it's all real. It's all personal experience that you've complemented with real-time facts. And I want to get back to doing these presentations live so I can go and watch you again.
I miss it. Doing webinars left and right. I got one tomorrow. I mean, that just didn't one last week on it, but it's not the same.
It's not the same. You don't get the opportunity to engage with the crowd, and you do that very well as also. But we're all living this new life in COVID. But one of the things that we wanted to chat about today was about respite care and how important that is. And I think that's one of the main focuses, if I understand the Dementia Spotlight Foundation correctly, of providing respite care for caregivers.
We have a great program I'm so proud of that we've been building on it through Florida and Georgia. We're doing multiple counties that we're basically doing free respite care, and it's all coming out of fundraisers and stuff like the people itself and the generosity on this stuff on it, a lot of it on it, and it's so needed. My God, imagine when we were caregiving and somebody goes, "Hey, Chris, you want a break for an afternoon? You want to get away, man?"
Want to get away?
The thing that we're doing, you don't even have to take your wallet out of your pocket. We're paying for this stuff on it, but it's not as easy as you think. Trying to take these families to take it is not. You think it was just, oh yeah, please. Sometimes I'm like, hey, don't make me get on my hands and knees and beg you to take free help.
Beg you to take respite.
I mean, I'm working on with one woman right now. I've been on the phone with her all last week on it. She wants to just do 2 hours. I was like, I can't get a home care agency to come out for 2 hours. They just won't do it. I mean, you get a 4-hour minimum deal, and she goes, "Oh, 4 hours." It's like, that's a lifetime. I'm like, no, it's 4 hours. You're going to get out of the house. And I try to explain to him, I'm as worried about you as I am your husband.
Right.
You need the break too on it, and it's amazing to know. And I try to explain to him. I go, this could be your very first experience. Consider this as like a practice run, because eventually you're going to have somebody come in this house and help you. If you're looking for help now, what's it going to be even 6 months from now?
And it's so hard to get that message across.
And I understand where they're coming from. I had the one gentleman, he told me, he goes, I've been with my wife since she was 14. I can't let somebody come in here. I go, yes, you can. You can. And once they do it once, they're like, hey, that wasn't so bad. But it's getting to pull that, get them to pull that teeth there a little bit and say, come on, you can do this on it. And sometimes it's a struggle. Some people are just thrilled to death, man. Like, just send me some more, man. I mean, but it's an experience for everybody.
So walk me through the process of how somebody could apply for the respite assistance.
All right. So if you go to dementiaspotlightfoundation.org, there's an application for respite care on the website. On it, you'll see right at the top, it says respite care program on it. If you fall into one of our counties that we're covering on it, in Florida, we're doing Pinellas, Pasco, Citrus, Hernando. We're getting ready to move into Pinellas. So we're doing 5, going on 6 counties really on this area on it. We're covering 4 or 5 counties there in Georgia on it. And the only need you have to have is a diagnosis of some type of dementia.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we are trying to help the ones that are in more financial need first. I mean, on as much as we can on it. But we're going to have to, it's not going to be much of a screening. Basically, you're going to get a phone call from me. And I'm going to approve you on it. And that's the deal on it. And it's just, we'll set you up. Sometimes it's going to be home care. Sometimes it might be an adult day program for the person on it. And we do a lot of bartering through this on it. I mean, I'll have a home daycare agency give me 10 free days. Sometimes it's not all about money when you do work with this nonprofit stuff on it, man. I might have an assisted living with a memory care unit. Give me 4 free days. Well, I'll break that in half. I'll give one family 2 days. They get 48 hours off. I'll give the other family the other 48 hours. And it's free. And I'm so proud. So my goal is in the next 2 years to cover all of Florida and all of Georgia and then just keep moving on from there.
I like that goal of yours because respite is.
It can be done. It's going to take some money.
It can be done, and it needs to be done. This is an issue that is not going away. It's only going to intensify. And when you think about the cost to care, both the financial cost, but then the emotional cost to care, having some respite is so important. But talking to people into it is difficult as you.
And then raising the money is the other half. This year is difficult with the COVID. I mean, our biggest fundraisers have been canceled on it. But we're telling all the people, the bottom line is a $25 donation is 1 hour of a break for a caregiver. Every $25 gives that caregiver out of the house for an hour.
It gets that caregiver out of the house for an hour.
Right. And that's a simple way to look at it. I'm like, so, I mean, would you help a caregiver family if you can? Most people will say yes.
Most people would say yes. Mm-hmm. And I love it that the agencies are kicking in some free time as well. I mean, that's very important.
Like I said, there's a lot of bartering involved to make this work. I've worked with some amazing people through this on it. I mean, some of these home agencies, they're breaking even. They're not making any money on this stuff on it. I mean, they're giving me the lowest rates they can, to go through this stuff on it.
Right. But they're giving back. They're giving back to the community, and they're part of something bigger.
And on their point, I only deal with companies I'm very comfortable with.
For sure,
we work over the years still on it. I mean, nobody less than a CNA goes and visits that person. Mm-hmm. And that's the minimum requirements that we have a deal on it. But if they do a good job, this family might put them into hire.
They might hire them. It's a win-win.
Right. And the helping on it, man. You do the follow-up calls, you call these people, man, and I've had people just breaking down in tears. Because I finally got to go to my grandson's softball game. I've never seen him play before. I haven't left the house for this long. You hear all these stories, man. It's just, almost puts me in tears half the time.
Well, again, I'm going to embarrass you. So, and the great thing about these folks calling you is that you've walked in their shoes. You get it. You're talking to them from experience. It's calling Gary Joseph LeBlanc is not like calling an 800 number. You're not sure who you're going to get or what they're going to say. You're going to get somebody that has walked in the shoes and has a heart and knows exactly what's going on.
Half of them are amazed. They fill out the application and we're calling them either that afternoon or the next morning. I mean, it's like that.
Turn around, right?
Situations sometimes within 2 days they're getting home care coming out. So
I'm sure that's even more difficult for them to believe that something like this can happen that fast and they get a response.
And it can happen that fast if you're on it. I mean, it's just being on top of the stuff and working with the right people.
Mm-hmm. And so I want to shift just a little bit and talk a little bit about you, and because you've you've been a mentor of mine. I didn't deal with dementia as I was in the middle of caregiving. And as I've learned so much from you, from your presentations and your books and your column. But how are you doing? How are you feeling with all this?
I'm good. I've gone through some health issues the past couple of years on it that we're dealing with on it. So I've developed RA, rheumatoid arthritis. That it can be painful.
Yeah.
I'm on some medication that I don't really like, but I got to do what makes it work on it. So, but this stuff, I'm just wondering, you just got to keep working. I mean, when I run myself and things get down, what do? You work harder. I mean, that's just how I am and been raised doing on it. So I'm not saying that's good for everybody, but that works for me.
Right. Well, and it's not so much work; it's your passion, and that's why it's such a delight to know you. And I also want to talk about. I mean, you're an accomplished author, so let's talk about your books.
Well, I've written 4 books on dementia care. Co-authored 1, written 3 on it. Very happy, with pleasure on it. I wrote a weekly column for 12 years called Common Sense Caregiving, and that's what started all the writing part of it on it. I've always figured I was going to be a writer. That was my goal early in life on it. But I never, if somebody would have told me 25, 30 years ago I'd be writing on dementia and Alzheimer's, I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. You never know where this world's going to take you.
You never know where it's going to take you.
All right. So I ended up writing on that on it. The books have done well. One of them's done extremely well on it. I came into it at the right time when I started writing books on dementia and on Alzheimer's and caregiving. It was new.
There wasn't.
Now today there are a dime a dozen on it. So I did hit it at the right time. Where that goes on. But that's not the important part. The important part is, bottom line is, like I said 23 years ago, I was struggling for stuff. The 36-hour day at one point, probably 18 years ago, had just come out.
Right.
And I'm nothing wrong about the book, but to me, it was just a little bit more medical, clinical than it was for helping the caregiver. So I'm on chapter 7. I'm like, come on, I got to find something that's going to actually help me here on it. And it did come in the booklet. Now they've done 5, 6 editions of that book. They've really put it together and made a much better book out of it on the beginning on it. But that's what made this is crazy. I've got to do something about this. And that's what made me write my first book on it. And I got to put that personal aspect into it on it. I mean, it's even when I'm out speaking, and because you've been to my events, I don't put myself on this plateau like a doctor. No. I'm going to be on that caregiver level.
You're on the you're on level ground.
Let me tell you what happened to me. You bring the personal stories inside with the clinical training and all that on it, and you mix it together. And it doesn't matter who I'm. I could be training hospital staff, and I still bring the same story together.
Bring the same story. It's people connect to stories, and when you can connect your own personal story and you fill that in with, with details, people get it.
Just because you're educating a room of professional caregivers does not mean that half of them doesn't have somebody with dementia in their family.
Exactly.
I'll be out training the sheriff's department, all the deputies in there, a room of 50 deputies, and half of that room of deputies has somebody in their family with dementia in their family.
And so half of that has never revealed that or talked about it to another coworker.
The other half of deputies, they're on the road and they're running into it every day.
They're running into it every day. And how do you deal with it?
I am very fortunate to be helping the sheriff's department throughout the state on it. We're trying to get it to Georgia and do more of that stuff on it.
Yeah.
Because it's so much needed.
You're making a big difference.
You know how I feel about the Baker Act in Florida.
Oh yeah, we could do a whole show with the Baker Act.
I got a call last week. My first person got this Baker Act in Pinellas County, and it's day one. It was already a mess.
Yeah. You're giving them skills that they're so that's desperately needed, and they can understand and do their job better. So
one day we ought to do a show just on the Baker Act and dementia.
Oh, well, we can book that. That'll be a show for our new 24/7 streaming radio service. How does that sound?
Yeah.
And we can have some guests call in. That'd be awesome. Yeah.
The average person takes a Baker Act in 72 hours. Well, when you put dementia in the tie, the average Baker Act is now 7.5 days. And if it's a disease like Lewy bodies, then it gets up to 21 days.
Yes.
I mean, it's just so many things that people don't understand about when a Baker Act is pulled. Or 5150, depending on what state you're listening from. It's different terms, but in Florida we call it a Baker Act. So,
and just think of the trauma that not only that the person feels, but the family when this all goes through. Oh, well,
That's just for example right now. So nobody can go visit the person in the Baker Active for the first 72 hours. Now with the COVID, if they're there 2 weeks, you still can't go visit them.
You still can't go.
Right. So it's even a longer period that they don't understand. They feel like they're abandoned and all that stuff on it. So.
And that's why the name of your column was Common Sense Caregiving, because a lot of this, if we just talk about it, it is very common sense if you just look at this realistically.
Sometimes you got to back off and try not to get too clinically on this and do the common sense type of care.
The common sense type of thing.
Sometimes we're making the problem. That's the honest truth. That's caregiving.
There you go. Well, there's one more thing I want to ask you about, because one of my favorite topics, and you wrote about it, was life after caregiving, the after effects of caregiving, and it kind of ties into, as we started earlier, about respite. Why respite is so important, because as we both know, caregiving does eventually end, and respite does at least a little bit helps the ending just to be a little bit easier.
Caring for the person that you've loved and you've been taking care of for maybe a decade, maybe 1 year, maybe 5 years, maybe 15 years, does end, but does the after effects end? And
right.
To be honest, the after effects will normally run 2 to 3 years afterwards.
Easily.
On it. And what we got to be very close with, what we got to be very careful with, is that all of a sudden this grieving and depression get tangled together.
I understand that one more than I want to.
And the depression just doesn't come from the loss of your loved one. It's already been building through the caregiving aspect on it.
Right.
But a lot of people that are caring for people with dementia, they don't understand is that depression by itself can create symptoms of dementia.
Right.
Right. So here you get the person carrying, all of a sudden the dementia seems to be getting worse, but is it coming out of depression on top? Well, the caregivers are going through the same thing with the depression. They get second caregiver depression. So I can't tell how many caregivers will come up to me and ask me, so Gary, is Alzheimer's contagious? Because now I swear to God, I just got it. What's actually happening is that the caregiver depression is sinking in. They're getting symptoms of dementia coming out of the depression, but it does feel like it's contagious.
Right. We could do a whole other show on.
It's something we just got to be careful with, because we can't let this get clinical. If the clinical depression kicks in after your loved one's gone, you might not ever get out of it. So we got to we need to teach people about the after effects today. Not after they're gone.
Not after they're gone. This has to be a discussion that goes on while you're in the midst of caregiving. And unfortunately, people just aren't comfortable with it. Whatever it is in our society, we're
all trying to be brave soldiers, man. We all say, I can handle this, man. I'm okay.
I could do this. I'm tough. But
we got to be a little bit more honest with ourselves, really.
Yeah, there's two very common aspects to caregiving. There's a beginning and there's an end, and we're not prepared for either one of these life-changing events. But you're certainly making a difference.
My dad used to tell me, he goes, anybody can write a book with the beginning and the end. It's the middle you need to work on.
It's the middle you need to work on. That's really good.
You got a point. You had a point there.
Okay, I think this is a great place for us to take our break. And as I kind of forewarn you, and I'm doing this with all my guests here on 30 and 30, I want to come from the back. When I come back for the break, I want to know a fun fact about you that I don't know, that I know all of our listeners will know. I think I know pretty much about you, so I'm going to be interested to hear what you come up with.
Yeah.
Okay, you're listening to Healing Ties on the Whole Care Network. We'll be right back.
Tomorrow on Healing Ties 2.0.
We provide engagement, which is helping staff to operate more efficiently, for family members to stay in touch with their loved ones and know that the level of care that they are accustomed to is happening, and for residents to stay engaged, especially during this time where people are going into lockdown and don't get to see their loved ones. How do they stay well? How do they stay happy? How do they stay engaged with each other, right? It's a huge issue. Social isolation is such a problem. So we're trying to address those issues. I'm Josh Stadzinski, VP of Marketing at CareMerge, and join me on Healing Ties podcast as I talk about how we're improving caregivers' lives through technology.
Join us tomorrow and every day in November for 30 shows in 30 days. Healing Ties 2.0, available at thewholecarenetwork.com/Healing Ties and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
Well, welcome back, everybody. I am continuing my delightful conversation with my good friend, Gary Joseph LeBlanc from the Dementia Spotlight Foundation. And Gary, I forewarned you before the break. We want to know one fun fact about you that I may not know, and all of our listeners are eager to find out.
Yeah. Well, Chris knows because he's been to my store before, but I've had a used bookstore. I live about an hour north of Tampa, in a town called Spring Hill. I've had a bookstore for 31 years, but I am an enthusiastic comic book collector.
Yes, you are.
And I wish I had the stuff I did when I was a teenager and younger, man, because the value of stuff that you don't understand as a kid on it, man. But yeah, when I was 5 to 8 years old, man, I had it rolled up in my back pocket, running around on my bike through the neighborhood on it. But it all started with my brother was the oldest of the family, and he hung out with all his guys. I was the youngest in the family. The tag along, let's just say, as we go through all this on it. So there used to be an A&P store in our neighborhood. Well, the guy that owned the grocery store would let us sit out on it, let us go in the store, grab comics off the shelf, sit on the curb right out his window. As long as we didn't damage them, we could put them back on the shelf. Meanwhile, it kept us out of his store. He could keep an eye on us. That was the beginning of reading DC Comics and all that stuff on it. And it's just such a fantastic. Everybody needs a superhero in their life. You know,
everybody needs a
fantasy in their life on it.
Everybody needs a superhero.
And what parents don't understand is the vocabulary in a lot of these comics. It's like this little kid's like, where'd you learn those big words, man? X-Man.
X-Man.
And they don't realize that the vocabulary in these comics or something. Sometimes I'm still picking up a dictionary, looking at what they're talking about and some of this stuff. Depending on who writes the stories and writing the books on it.
Yeah. Well, your bookstore is awesome.
Sometimes when you're a collector and you sell, it's hard.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you have a favorite comic?
I grew up on Justice League.
Okay.
So that was really my favorite all the way through on it. I've got multiple favorites. I love the horror stuff, the old horror, like Vampirella.
Oh, okay.
Very good. Old Warren mags on it. So that's something I truly like on it. Hard to come by, at least in good shape. Find the ones in good condition. It's a difficult thing on it. So I always say sometimes it's the search that's fun and collecting wise on it. There's a lot of truth to that. Oh, I've been looking for this one for years. I can't believe you got it in your hands. And you're like, I finally got this copy, you know.
What a good feeling. Your bookstore is awesome. I would recommend everybody search out Gary's bookstore, and Gary's going to give the address here in just a moment. But Gary, you know, we have so many topics that we could talk about, but one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on the 30 and 30 reboot is because you were one of my first guests when I originally started podcasting way back when we were talking about the Purple Wristband Project.
I remember we were in Melbourne, Florida. I think I had just done an event.
Right.
And you had a little stand, you had your iPhone there, and
Oh, how things have changed over the years.
That was many years ago now. You put it all together.
Yeah, but would love to have you part of the new streaming service, and there's so much good information we can provide, and just to have you as a friend is good enough too. So I can't thank you enough for joining me today.
It's been a pleasure, and I love being here with you on it. So thank you.
So let our listeners know how they can find you, all your books, and especially the bookstore itself.
You can find everything about me pretty much in how to get my books and everything through DementiaSpotlightFoundation.org. And just Google US41 Books for the store. So I'm only open on weekends. I do the dementia stuff during the week. I get the bookstore just open on the weekends. It's just, my dad used to say, well, if we don't put any money in the till today, we'll call it a hobby. Let's try not to have too many hobbies.
I like that. I would call this. But Gary, with the stories that you share and the work that you do, you are certainly someone who's creating healing ties all around us. I can't thank you enough for what you do, and I can't thank you enough for your friendship.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
What a delightful conversation today. But that does it for this episode of Healing Ties. As you know, I'm your host, Christopher McClellan. You might know me as the Bowtie Guy. I've created a life to love after caregiving ends by sharing stories, resources, and being with awesome people like Gary Joseph LeBlanc. Healing Ties is produced in the posh studios of Oddbox Production in downtown St. Louis. And please check out our soft launch of our Whole Care Network website, where you'll get an opportunity to meet Bo. And as soon as you see Bo, you are going to get it. And we'll see you for another episode of Healing Ties, tomorrow, as we continue our 30 and 30 podcast celebrating National Family Caregivers Month. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye for now.
Ciao.
This is WCN, the Whole Care Network. You talk, we listen.